Hello, this is Carrie Fell. Welcome to my studio.
Today I'm going to do some dyeing, and it's an experiment, a test actually. I have two small cones here of what is being sold as silk. Now, the cones inside are imprinted with Century Rayon on this one, and this one is Grassam Industries Indian Rayon. So they both come from India, and they are sold as silk, but the cones say rayon. And so we are going to test that out by dyeing today, and we're going to see if this takes dye well. If it takes dye, it means it's silk. If it doesn't take dye, it's a good chance that it's the rayon. Silk is will take an acid dye, and rayon won't. Rayon is plant fiber, and it doesn't work with acid dyes. So we're going to wind a hank of each of these and dye it in a darker color and see how well it takes the dye. One thing we're also going to check is the smell. Some silk, not all of it, but I think some silk has a very distinctive smell when it's wet. And so the first thing I'm going to do when I soak it is give it a good sniff test. So I'm going to add in a little control. What I'm going to do is I'm going to dye some of what I know is rayon, and we can also compare that. So this is bamboo, rayon from bamboo, and this is tencel. They're not exactly the same colors as what we have here, but they're as close as I have. So that's what we're gonna dye as well, make a little mini skein of those. And then I have a little bit of silk. This I know is silk. I've had it for a number of years. This is what's left of a very large skein. I've woven many things with this, and it has the smell. So yeah, this is silk. We're going to dye this, and although it's not starting off as the same color as these, it is going to give us a good idea of how it takes the dye. So one more comparison to throw into the mix. All right, I've wound up some hanks and labeled them. So these are the two that we're testing to see if they're rayon or silk. And so they're labeled as unknown A, blue, and unknown B, green. And then as some controls, I have wound off from my stash a hank of bamboo, which is in a similar color. So this is rayon from bamboo, and tencel, which is a type of rayon as well. I didn't have the exact same color, so that's as close as I can get with a lime green. And then I have some silk that I know is silk. So unfortunately, I don't have it in blue. Oh, I do have some blue silk. Let me go see if I can wind some, and that way we can compare it. Exactly. Yeah, hang on. Okay, I found my royal blue silk. It was tucked away in timeout because it's given me nothing but grief in its lifetime. I've had it for a long time. It is extremely springy. It's very lively. I've managed to get this part in multiple chokes. This one's got 4 chokes on it. It's very hard to work with, so I'd hidden it away in a tub in the back of the cupboard because of how difficult it is to use, so I'd forgotten about it. But here it is. It's fairly similar in color to the unknown. I mean, not the same, but and to the bamboo. So that's a good control. It's got a different spin and a different gloss to it, so it's a slightly different kind of silk, but we'll see how it takes dye. So I think that's a pretty good lineup here. We've got the unknown A, blue, unknown B, which is green, bamboo, rayon from bamboo, rayon from tencel, silk, and silk. And we will dye all these with acid dyes and then do some comparisons. Okay, fresh water, tap water, no citric acid. We're just going to wet these first. So here we have our 6 mini skeins, and we're just going to spread them out. Make them wet. And soak them well. Once they're thoroughly saturated, I'll come and smell them, and then we'll set up a dye pot. Okay, the 6 little hanks are all completely saturated. They're all sitting at the bottom, completely soaked through, and now I'm going to smell them. I've got my assistant here, my son, and he is going to pull them out one at a time. I'm going to be wearing my hat down over my eyes, and I'm going to separate them out, going completely by smell, and then we're going to see if I'm able to tell the difference between the various fibers.
Alright, it's being held up.
Okay, this side.
Alright.
Alright, results of the test. Well, the first result is that the water has turned blue. Okay, so on this side is bamboo, tencel, and the little silk, and I suspect this is the one that I wasn't sure about.
Yeah.
By the smell, I wasn't sure. And then on this side, we have the silk and the suspected silk, that's the unknown, and the unknown blue. So these 3 smelled of silk, quite obviously to me. These 2 obviously did not smell like silk. And this one I wasn't sure about. I needed a few tests, a few sniffs to figure it out. But it might be just because there's not very much of it.
Yeah, excuses.
I smell the silk now. But these definitely smelled like silk.
Now next time we're going to do it with Brussels sprouts.
I neglected to press record for this part, so I'll just explain what's going on here. This is the clump of all 6 skeins, and near the bottom of the clump there's 2 zip ties close to each other, and they're there to provide resist. So they're tightly bound around all 6 skeins, and the dye won't reach that area, and we'll be able to see the color of the yarn before it was dyed.
So here's a bundle of fibers. I'll lower it into the pot. And we can see that we have a nice tangled mess here. Should be okay to untangle later. There's lots of ties and loops on it. So the ties are nylon, so they also will dye.
There we go. So there's lots of dye in there. We can see it's quite dark. I didn't measure. I took about a quarter of a teaspoon of the dry dye powder. So whatever that works out to. So now now I'm going to turn on some heat. There's plenty of acid already in there, so with some heat it should start to bind to the fiber. Okay, been 15 minutes or so, and it's still quite dark in there. It's just starting to get hot. Might have put too much dye powder in, but too much is better than not enough. We want this to be conclusive. So what we're seeing is one of the blues looks to still be blue and is not getting black. Can't really tell much about the rest, but I'm moving it around in there. These are handy zip ties for that. Just using them to stir and get the dye color into all the bits of yarn. I don't know if I'll get the water to clear because I have so much dye in there, but we'll let it get to a good steam for a while and see what happens.
So it's been another half hour or so, and I think I put way too much dye in for this little bit of yarn. I put enough dye in for all the yarn, but of course not all of it is taking it up. But I think I still over calculated. Just by putting in that little pinch of dry powder was too much. So it's probably absorbed as much as it's going to. So this mess of yarn and ties I'm just going to leave it in there. I'm going to turn off the heat and let it cool down in the pot.
Okay, it is lukewarm. And this is an unusual dye project in that the water didn't clear. Usually with acid dyes, the water clears and all the dye is in the yarn. Well, I put in more dye than was needed for this amount of yarn. It's just a small amount of yarn. Plus, some of this yarn does not take the dye. So we have a lot left over. It dyed the nylon ties nicely. So I'm going to have to rinse out the excess dye because there will be excess dye in this one. And yeah, this is the one I call the Sputnik because there are ties everywhere. So it'll take a bit of untangling. First I'm going to rinse it though, and then we'll sort it out and see what is what. This dye bath I will use for something else. There's still lots of color in there. It has a very purplish tinge, so that's interesting. But yes, this is leftover black and I will use it. So I rinsed this a number of times, and I don't know if you can see, but there is still some color in the water. So it hasn't completely rinsed out yet, but we're not done. So I'm going to take off some zip ties, and these are the ones that are causing the resist. So we should see some color on the other side of this. one. So here's all the different skeins, which have become wonderfully tangled. There's one. Oh, well, look at that. It seems to have taken on the color of the neighboring skeins. Isn't that interesting? Judging from the size of this is the little tiny skein of silk, yes. And it took on the color of the skeins it was attached to, or neighbors with. Wow, okay. And I don't even know what those are. This one is obviously blue, and this is the bamboo. It looks like it, we'll know more when it's dry. It didn't take much. It took a little bit. You can see a little bit of resist there. But that might even wash out. This is the tencel. So it did take a bit of a tint. I wonder if that will wash out. Alright, this is the silk, the lively silk. It dyed beautifully, very sharp lines. And then this is the unknown, the suspected silk, and it sure looks like silk. It's got a sharp line as well. So we'll know more when it's dry. I'll squeeze some of the, I'll squeeze out some of the excess water and hang this to dry, and then we will take another look. Okay, here are all my samples the next day out of the Dyepot and dried. So I lined them up in the same order that they were before. These are the sources here. So this is known silk, and I don't have any more left of my white silk, but yeah. This is green tencel, blue bamboo. This is the unknown green and the unknown blue. These are the ones that are being sold as silk, but the labeling says rayon on it, so it's very confusing. So these are the two that we're testing to try to determine what they could be. So what we've found is the silk dyes beautifully, and the black stuck well, and we have it turned very black. Where the resist was is still the same blue with a very sharp line in between. This is the other silk that I had, and it was sort of an off-white color. It ended up taking on some color of its neighbors. These were all tied in a bundle together with the resist squeezing them very tightly. So the combination of the acid and the heat actually caused some of the color to transfer onto the light color, which is good to know actually. Now I know to dye it by itself if I don't want any transference. So this is the tencel, which is a rayon fiber, and there's the original color there, and this is the over-dyed with black color. It has stained a little bit, but as you can see, it's not black. You can still see the green. And I suspect that more of this will wash out
with each wash that I do, just because it is a rayon fiber and acid dyes do not work well on it. This is the bamboo, which is blue, and it took even less of the black dye. It's very hard to see the resist point here where the original blue color is, as opposed to the dyed part. So as a slight stain. But yes, it didn't take the dye well at all. Here we have the yarn under question, and it's the green one, and it's quite obvious. The black dyed it beautifully. It took the dye perfectly. You can see this is the original color and this is the dyed color. And the same with the blue. It's a little darker to begin with, so there's the original blue color and there's the dyed black color. Now, these two tend to resemble my known silk skein here. I think it's quite obvious that these two resemble this skein. These two do not resemble these two skeins here. So I'm going to confidently say that these two skeins that came off of the cones under question are silk. They are not rayon. They don't look like this. They look like the silk, not the rayon. So yes, I'm very confident in calling these two cones silk, despite the fact that they are stamped inside with the company name of Rayon. I think that maybe these cones are just reused from something else.
If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment or a question below. And check out my Patreon if you'd like to support this and any other videos I do. Thank you for watching.